welcome back to another episode of the Grunge Bible Podcast. This is episode 211. My name is Ethan Shalloway. I'm joined by Chris Salona. We are your hosts for the Grunge Bible Podcast. This is April 7th, 2025, and we are rolling along. Chris, how are you doing, man?
I'm good, Ethan. It's good to be here for episode number 211. As we said, we are recording this, for me at least, it's a very rainy, gloomy weekend, Sunday afternoon here. This episode will come out tomorrow morning, so that's always good to get it in right before deadline, right before the printing presses go to work and this thing ends up in the newsstands worldwide. I'm good, though. I had a pretty good weekend, just kind of taking it easy a little bit. Been really on the ball lately, really feeling really healthy, getting a lot of stuff done at work and in other areas of my life. So I feel pretty good. I'm going to feel good once we get this done and I can enjoy the rest of my Sunday here and, head into another week. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah. It's similar. It's a rainy day. I woke up at 7 a.m. today to the sound of thunder, and it was great.
First of the season, I bet, too. First kind of spring thunderstorm.
Yeah, we had some storms. We had some tornadoes come through, tornado-type winds a couple weeks ago. But this one, it was like 7 o'clock, and I looked at this, the radar, and it was going to be there till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, something like that. And it was thundering for a couple hours. I was like, damn. It was awesome. I rolled over. I saw that it was going to be the next 4 hours. So I was like, perfect. So I put my phone down and went back to bed for a little bit to the sound of thunder. It was great. So that was really nice. I mean, it's a low-key weekend, just kind of resting and, in hiding, as we like to say. We had to go into hiding and just trying to control what we can control. And it's been good. We're just living life, whatever that means for everybody,
Yeah, that's life for a lot of people out there. And you're heading into this week. You open up your javelin season, correct?
Yeah, this week is hopefully the opener. I need to hear back from Alabama, but they should let me in, and I'll open up the season in Tuscaloosa. Pretty excited to see where I'm at, see how it goes. I mean, it's just a college meet. It's nothing too crazy.
Get the feet wet again.
A good barometer of where I'm at. Yeah, so. It'll be nice. There's a lot coming down the pipe, a lot to get prepared for. So it's a good measuring stick to see where we're at, and just kind of get back on the runway. It's been a bit, and it's an exciting time of year for sure, all the way to the end of August basically. So it'll be solid. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Time to get on the horse again.
Yeah, remember why I'm doing what I'm doing basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because in the fall and winter, it's the dog days of training. You're just training and putting a lot of time into it, and you don't get that time to step on the platform until the spring. So
nice, man. Well, that's exciting. It's always a good time of year. Get those jitters once again that you felt back at the beginning of all of this, and as you said, kind of remember why you're doing it, and just be excited to have those opportunities. That's always it's always a great time of year. You see, different people in the javelin world opening up and, having some good marks and getting off to a good start. It's inspiring, and I think it probably reawakens, that competitive element for you.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's rolling. I'm like, all right, it's time to go. So, so that's something to look forward to. I'm pretty excited, but I'm happy to be here talking on the podcast with you. It's always nice to get on the little FaceTime and, record some thoughts and whatnot. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We had a big week. Actually, it happened on, I guess, Friday. No.
Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday. Because, today is the 6th. Friday was the... I'm getting it all messed up.
Saturday Sunday, was the 5th. The Monday is the 7th.
Yeah, exactly. So on April 5th, that was the date that we learned of the passing of Layne and Kurt Cobain, 94 and 2002. So... we're going to kind of go back. We did this once a year where we talk about these two legends. Obviously they share the same death anniversary, so it's a good time to kind of go back and talk. This year we're going to be talking about what happened right after they found out that they had passed away, whether it be vigils or certain concerts or just quotes and how people kind of reacted right away. We try to mix it up each year because we do talk about it once a year, and it's a big the cornerstone to our podcast and our page. So we try to do it a little different each time. And I think this conversation will be, really solid and good reflection, a lot of good thoughts, and just to get thinking about, loss and remembering people that we love.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been doing this podcast for a while, so we do kind of change it up. I think first couple of years around the April 5th date, we kind of talked about our feelings about those artists. Last year, I think we shared a bunch of different quotes from Layne and Kurt, and this year kind of taking a different approach and remembering them and paying tribute to them through the words and tributes of others, both at the time and as time has gone on. So definitely a busy week, and we'll kind of be chronicling, the tributes that others made. Back in 1994, Kurt died on the 5th, and the news broke on April 8th. So sharing things that happened on the 8th and afterwards, and same thing with Layne having passed away on the 5th of April 2002, and news didn't break for that one until the 19th or 20th. So about a week and a half or 2 weeks later. So we'll be going back and sharing the words, of those who knew them and those certainly who were impacted them, as we all were, and as we all continue to be, I think, around these parts. So it'll be a good conversation, talking about these artists that continue to mean a lot to us, even, 31 years later for Kurt and 23 years later for Layne. So happy to have the opportunity to do that with you, Ethan, and with everyone out there listening. So here we are, and we have a couple of things to get to before we start. And as we like to do, we like to, give thanks to the individuals that give us the opportunity to do this. And it's been a big week in terms of the support of the podcast. First and foremost, I am happy to announce that there have been no protective tariffs levied against the Grunge Bible podcast. So the prices are still the price. We are not passing on anything to anybody else. But I'm even more excited to say that we have some new members at new levels here on Grunge Bible, particularly on the Patreon. And this one's great. So Abraham is the cutest basset hound ever has been a loyal Patreon supporter at the top level for some time now, but they have decided to up the ante, and we have our first $15 tier. That individual behind that account, it might be Abraham the Basset Hound, I don't know, but they've decided to up the ante and create a new tier at $15, which is great. And we can confirm to you today that Abraham is in fact the cutest Basset Hound ever. We had requested some photographs of Abraham, and what a beautiful Basset Hound Abraham is. So very, very grateful for that. And we also want to give a big shout out to Sunshine Slackers. I'm gonna butcher that if I say that again, probably, but they have updated their Patreon level to the top tier. So I now have the privilege of testing myself to see if I can say Sunshine Slackers without saying Shunshine Schlackers or what have you each week. So thanks a bunch to both of you, for supporting it and for supporting it at a greater level than you have in the past. That's what it's all about. We challenged people a couple of weeks ago to kind of, up the ante a little bit, and certainly they've answered the bell and answered the call. So really, really pumped about that.
Yeah, a little hash slinging slasher.
Exactly. The arsonist does have oddly shaped feet.
Yeah, I love taking a step to a tier that was not present at the time, going above and beyond. And I guess we need to name that, and we can name that the Abrahams of the world. And Abraham had many sons, so hopefully the father of all the tiers below is the top tier. So yeah, thank you so much for taking two people and increasing their their skin in the game. I love that. Really great.
That's a big deal, without a doubt. So at this time, I'm going to read the top tier and the individuals in it. So I'd like to thank A Bit Dusty, Black Hole Sean, D-Boat, Doug Endy, Eddie Vedder got me through my second divorce, Apona, Gochu John, Jade Mercado, Jamie Lynn, Carlene Salona, King Buzzo Stole My Hair, The Michael Dooley Project, Millie, Nikki Six, Russell, Seattle 4 Fanboy from New Jersey's, Sherry Matthews, the aforementioned Sunshine Slackers, and Abraham is the cutest Basset Hound ever, as well as What the Fuck is Up Denny's. So thanks, gang. Really appreciate your continued support, even after all these weeks, months, and years. So in addition to the Patreon updates, we have a new review on Apple Podcasts, which always a pleasure when these come through, because don't take it from us. Obviously, this is our show. Take it from the people that listen to the show. And we received a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts from somebody called The Truth 177. And they said, quote, These dudes love grunge. If you love grunge, you will love these dudes. They managed to always keep it fresh, which is impressive considering grunge ended last century. Truly takes not only a love of music, but a deep appreciation of artistry. Chris, Ethan, you rock. Also, shout out a fellow roadie resident. So, my kindred spirit out there, the Truth 177, thank you for that kind review. And we're going to try to keep it fresh and real for as long as we can around here, because as you said, it's been a while since grunge has been the thing, but we keep it fresh and keep it alive in our own ways, I suppose. So thanks for sticking around for the ride.
Yeah, it's a great review. I mean, the dudes love grunge, and you'll love these dudes if you love grunge. And that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
We try to. We don't want to be anything we're not, so we're just trying to be ourselves every time we come on air. So even when we take the week off and we have our friends, Gordon, Dick, come on and give us a little sports update. So.
Absolutely. We all get by with a little help from our friends, and always happy to lend the mic to the fine folks at WFMZ. Over there on the Sac Fly, the tri-state area's top sports afternoon talk radio show. So that was a privilege and a privilege, and an honor for us as it has been the last 2 years. But it's back to music this week, and I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So before we get to This Day in Music on April 7th, we found out right before we were recording that
this is important.
Looking back in the archives, April 6th. 11 years ago, so 2014, was the day that Chris and I met. And Drew. Drew met Chris for the first time. I knew Drew before, but that is the exact date that Chris visited Pitt to see if he wanted to go there for to continue his athletic career.
And enhance my education.
And enhance his education, as most people post about. And I just can't believe 11 years to this day that we're recording, me and Chris met. And Chris, it feels longer than 11 years, I would think.
It's one of those things, I don't know, like 11 years.
11's a long time.
Because we're, like, you're 30, I'm 28, so that's a significant chunk of our lives. And it does feel like, I don't know, like I've just, like, you've been my friend for my whole life and not just the 11 years. But I mean, there's so much that's happened in our lives and in our friendship over the last 11 years. But really funny, like we were just talking about that before we went on, and I went back and I checked the dates because I took some pictures of the campus that first afternoon that I was on my visit. And sure enough, 11 years ago today, like damn near right about this time. And it was also a Sunday afternoon. So really kind of timing up here. Dude, I was 17, you were 19, I think, when we met. Who knows where the time goes, man.
So that's pretty momentous. I mean, that is, back then we put ourselves in the shoes of our younger selves. I mean,
if we had known then what we know now.
If we had known then, you have no idea where life's going to go, and it's so much life in between there, and it is fantastic. I'm sure there's some old heads thinking back. I mean, they probably feel that every time we talk about certain music and put them back in at certain times. And, see, we're just suckers for nostalgia here on the GB pod. And so what are you going to do but reminisce and be like, man, I can't believe it. So that's it. I mean, that's when it all started 11 years ago. So pretty cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. So that's probably that's a very significant this day in music history to discuss. Technically, I guess it is music history since this is a music podcast. So let's move forward here. The actual day, April 7th, that's when this episode is coming out. And we'll take a quick rip through the things that occurred on this day in music history. So Ethan, I'll kick the first one over to you.
Yeah,
because I know this one just came up. I think a couple of days ago. You were listening to this man.
It did. So, in 1948, John Oates of Hall & Oates was born, and this week it was really nice. One of the days, and I wanted to listen to some yacht rock, and "You Make My Dreams Come True" by Hall & Oates came on, and I was like, wow. I sent it to Chris, and I was like, I just can't believe that in the 70s people were making music like just. It sounds so weird to say I can't believe people are making music with just instruments, but like just instruments, just vocals, good harmonies, and like really catchy tunes. And like people have been making great music for so long. And I love to think, like, obviously people are pushing the boundaries and making new stuff all the time. But in reality, like the recipe was developed hundreds of years ago, and we're just adding on to it. And these guys were making hits, just certified hits, like beautiful, like stuff that you could pick up and play. Like I can't I can sing the lyrics to, say rap songs or whatever. There's songs that you can't like replicate unless you have the right instrument, right software or whatever, or like, you need a whole band or something. But this stuff, like, you can get 4 guys each learn the parts and like you could play it. It's not gonna be as good, but like, you can just like, you can play it and like, oh, okay, can you play this song? It's like, yeah, I can play a guitar and sing it, and it'll be like awesome.
Yeah. The best thing about Hall & Oates too is this is not a Simon and Garfunkel situation where there's one doing all the work and one lesser talented individual along for the ride. I mean, Daryl Hall and John Oates, I mean, those guys, they were a hit factory, and they could fucking sing. Absolutely incredible stuff. And definitely it's always a good time to throw on some of their hits. I mean, they're titans of that era. And I think, some of their songs are songs that everybody knows, which you can't say that about every artist. So
Maneater.
Absolutely. So happy birthday to the great John Oates, born on this day in 1948. We're going to blast through a few decades here and go all the way up to 2008. And on this day, April 7th of 2008, the Stone Temple Pilots announced a reunion tour and that they were getting back together. And this was a big deal because this was the first time that they had played live or had made plans to play live since 2002. They had broken up after they released their greatest hits album, Thank You, in 2003, amidst a lot of, internal strife with the band and certainly individuals in the band going through a lot of stuff. So it was, must have been great, to maybe go and see some of those shows. Obviously, we obviously did not have the opportunity to do that, but great second act for that band, certainly. So pretty cool to commemorate that.
Always a good day when the band gets back together,
Oh yeah. It's always a good feeling. People love nostalgia.
People do. Yeah, I understand. I can't wait for some bands that broke up that I used to listen to come back.
Mm-hmm.
In 2015, Don McLean's original manuscript to his lyrics for American Pie sells at an auction for $1.2 million. And the day the music died, American Pie just came up in music history like a month ago or something. We were talking about it. And so I listened to it recently, and another just banger. I mean, that song was like all over the classic rock stations when I was growing up. I loved it. I thought it was awesome. It still is. I just haven't listened to it I listened to it pretty frequently back in the day. It felt like,
that thing is like, it's like a master's thesis in terms of music. I mean, that thing is it's not just like lyrics, like that's a manuscript right there.
Yeah. And no wonder it sold for 1.2 million. I mean, I did see something the other day about just like, I think it was there's like an Instagram page about people recording stuff for the first time, basically, and like in the studio, and like, so they're showing the producers for the first time, or it's like, oh, here's Eminem, like singing the first verse to this, or the MGMT or Passion Pit, or just like some really first round type of music stuff. And it's always beautiful to watch, because you're never going to see these artists with more passion for what they're singing than before they make it big, when they're trying to make it a hit, and like how they're basically getting out to the world, or to the producer for the first time. And it's always so special. So like that. And I was also listening to a podcast with Quentin Tarantino, and he was talking about how he has to do all of his writing on paper first, and then he like puts it onto, and then he types it up, because like you're just so connected with that manuscript, that first like pen to paper type. It's like just a word vomit, and you're just putting like everything goes into it. Like it's not like clean and like edited and whatnot, or it's just it's not on the computer. And so like I can understand where this is like an artifact, the lyrics and stuff, like it is really cool. I mean, of course, if you just get a Word document of like this, it would not be the same to like hold that
exactly
NFT or something.
I think people are so fascinated by having a connection to that exact moment in time where something that became so well known or so important to them was literally being created. And, you know, those situations where we're fortunate enough that somebody was, you know, had a camera in their hands and were shooting while, you know, these songs are being created or things are being written. Like I know the Beatles documentary for Apple TV, the Get Back documentary had a couple of instances of that where like these songs are being created. I've seen footage of Blink 182, you know, writing some of their stuff from, I think, Enema of the State. And, you know, there's some really, really good footage from a lot of different bands. But I mean, same thing with like, you know, that original sheet of paper that you're starting to write those lyrics down. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think really further connects you with the music. But it is interesting. I totally agree. For a long time, I think it was for Pearl Jam 20, they were doing like a little interview with Eddie Vedder, and he had a briefcase, like a big old fashioned briefcase that was just full of old notebooks and stuff. And he was talking to Cameron Crowe, who I think was behind the camera doing the interview, and he was asking Ed like, what, you know, what's in that? He's like, oh, you know, he's like, just like notebooks and pens that I trust when it comes time to write. And I really love that, as if it's like, you know, everything's got to be right. And even you know, you've got guitarists, for example, Mike McCready, I forget which style of guitar, but he's like, this is the guitar that I write on. He's like, I don't ever write on another one. Like, this is the one that I used to write on. And I'm so fascinated by, you know, cause it's like, you know, part science, part magic too. That like all the conditions have to be set. And like these artists like legitimately believe, and I believe them when they're like, I couldn't do it on a computer. Like I have to write, or like I have to be in this notebook, or I got to be using this pen. And it's just, I don't know, it's fascinating because I think all those conditions have to line up for, you know, the art to be created. So it's fascinating to kind of get a window into those processes that different artists have, you know, put their trust in over the years.
I wonder if those pens were, you know, when they ran out of ink, they would actually replace the ink cartridge.
I hope so.
Not
or
just
like
an old
pen, inkwell pen or something, maybe. I mean, you got those like novelists that will even today, like they like, yeah, I only write on typewriters and stuff. Yeah. You know, it's like, I got to respect it. You know, you got to do that kind of stuff. So
yeah, there's a connection to, I mean, it's just stuff builds up lore. Like, I mean, they could be as simple as like, you know, this piece of furniture has been with me in the last 3 houses. I don't know why, but it's sentimental, you know.
Yeah.
It's got a family text from my Shalloway side, you know, a group chat with like all the bloodline Shalloways that, you know, I don't even know if I have them all saved, you know. I mean, it wasn't that many, but it's just like we don't talk like that. But it was like there was just a stuffed ape animal, like a thing. I was like, this was Nan's. I've had it for 21 years. I'm wondering if anybody wants to like, you know, continue having it. And of course we're like, yeah, it needs to come back to the homestead. It's just, we know that she loved it, so we love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's cool.
Yeah, that stuff's great. One more event on this day in music history. On April 7th of 2020, John Prine passed away at age 73 of coronavirus. And I remember at the time he was one of the first public figures that I remembered dying from COVID. And that was the weird point in time where like nobody knew how long it was going to last. And I remember when John Prine died, everyone was just like, fuck, man, like that absolutely sucks. And just by happenstance, I've been listening to a lot more of his stuff. I've been like front to backing his 1971 self-titled album. That dude was a fucking legend. I mean, he was a great writer. He was hilarious too. And just such a good performer. So taking some time to remember John Prine, you know, 5 years gone, or 5 years, because it's 2025 now. So shout out to him. 73. That's all things considered. That's pretty young.
Yeah, it's pretty young. It's 1946 seems so far away right now, but he really was. That was kind of like, sadly, that was when I got into him more. Like I didn't listen to him.
Same. I had just started getting into it. One of my buddies, Austin, was like really, really into him.
And everybody talked about how great he was, and I was like, all right,
yeah.
Like all I can do now is go back and listen to his stuff and read his writings and whatnot. So
absolutely.
So that wraps up this day in music. I think we skipped over one. I don't know if you did intentionally.
I didn't even intend to do that.
Yeah,
why don't you round it out here?
I'm surprised. I was like, because I was getting ready to do the John Prine, but in 2017, on April 7th, Pearl Jam was inducted to the Hall of Fame.
Rock Hall of Fame. Everybody's favorite.
We definitely can't miss that. I mean, pretty big day for one of our great bands to be introduced, inducted into the Rock Hall of Fame. So it's pretty great, man. For what it's worth. I mean, you know how we feel about the Hall of Fames and of the world. So whatever. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about their induction ceremony is they invited. Well, there was a big beef at the time because they didn't induct Dave Abruzzese, their drummer from '91 to '94 or '92 to '94, whatever it was, and that was like a whole big thing. But I thought it was really cool at the induction ceremony. The inductees typically perform a few songs or whatever, and they brought back Dave Cruzen, who was their original drummer. And he played on Alive, which he plays on the record on 10, but he didn't do any touring or anything with Pearl Jam at the time. So it was cool to kind of see him back at the kit, all those years later with the band that, he was integral to the beginning of. So that was super cool. We're not going to get into the Pearl Jam drummer thing, but, just shouting out Dave
Abruzzese should be in the Hall of Fame with them.
I will not rest until he's in.
I said it.
So that's This Day in Music. Apologies for skipping Pearl Jam. You know how much I love the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So,
I'm sure it was unintentional.
Yeah, so excited that I glossed over it. So that's what was going on This Day in Music, April 7th, and we'll move forward to the main part of the episode. So as we said at the top, this year to, the April 5th date, we're taking a little bit of a different approach and, not talking about what we think, but we're talking about how others paid tribute to Kurt Cobain and Layne Staley at the time, both in 1994, 2002, and in the years since. So as we said, Kurt Cobain died on April 5th, but his body was not discovered until April 8th. So that's kind of when the news broke, I think that morning in Seattle. And then, certainly by the evening, everybody had known. And there were some things that went on that day and in the immediate aftermath. But there's a lot of good literature out there about Pearl Jam and Eddie Vedder's response to this. I'm going to butcher the names of the books, but perhaps I'll throw them in the show notes or something. But there's a lot of good literature about how they reacted, and because they were supposed to play a show that night in Fairfax, Virginia, April 8th of 1994. It was the day that everybody found out, and there was debate as to whether they were going to cancel it or what was going to go on. I remember there was one book where Eddie was like, I just need to get back to Seattle. I need to get back home. I can't be out on the road. And obviously his struggles with the whole fame thing, and then seeing, in a certain way, the effects of that on Kurt, who was the standard bearer of, that, of popular music at the time. But they did go on to perform that show at Fairfax, Virginia. And obviously he chose to address it a little bit. So they played 22 songs that night, and it was not until the 15th song, which was Porch. And right before they played Porch, Eddie Vedder was talking about his reaction to it. And I mean, it's the rawest of reactions because he just found out that day. And right before they played Porch, he said, sometimes whether you like it or not, people elevate you and it's real easy to fall. So I don't want to be somebody who delivers bad news, but I don't think any of us would be in the room tonight if it weren't for Kurt Cobain. And then they went in to perform Porch. And it's not surprising that that's kind of where Ed's thoughts were at the time, with the whole people elevate you and it's easy to fall, referencing Fame, because that was something that he very outwardly struggled with, I think, after 10, certainly during the Versus era, and trying to pull that record off, and, and all of the fame that came afterwards. And that was a seminal focus, I think, in a lot of the reporting and a lot of the immediate reaction to Kurt's death, is just how, I don't think anybody is well equipped to deal with that type of fame and to be in that public eye. Certainly if they're already struggling with a lot of different things that Kurt was certainly struggling with. So I think when you look back to how people reacted right at that time, it really frames just the severity of that situation. So I always thought that his words were really, really pointed and a great reminder. I always fixate on that part where he says it's real easy to fall, because I think that's applicable to, to all of us when times are good, or when, there's a lot of responsibility on us, or whether there's a lot of attention on us.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. This was, his brother in arms, basically, leading the charge in music. And when you see someone that is doing the same thing as you, go down, I mean, you have to think about your own life and think about your position, make sure you're, there's probably a lot of introspection of be like, oh, can I handle this? Is this going to happen to me? I mean, there's a lot of, it probably really did rock the music world because it's like, oh, I'm living this, really similar life, totally different stories, but really, you're in a similar position. So it probably was a little spooky to, whenever that stuff happens, because it's happened. I mean, there's been tales before Kurt and those tales after, and there will be more, sadly ahead. But yeah, they're really confronted with the reality of like, oh, this is like the same profession I'm doing, and this had the effect on him. So I need to be careful, and I need to make sure that, I can control what I can control.
Yeah, 100%. And I think those events, a lot of those musicians, certainly from Seattle, I think Kurt's death informed a lot of where they would take their music and how open they would be about a lot of things. And certainly I think the way that different people approached, the band itself, Kurt as a person and what he meant to a lot of people. We were just talking earlier, and I'm going to post it on the 8th, 31 years to the day, but there's a mashup of news reports from 3 of the major U.S. news broadcasters. It was ABC, NBC, and CBS. And it's interesting, all of the anchors and the bylines, it's all, an artist who succumbed to fame, who was just writing about, anger and violence and despair. And it's just interesting, the older generations always, paint with broad strokes when it comes to the things that impact their youth. And it certainly happened with that, and kind of talking about what grunge meant to those kids. And, they had a couple of interviews and some of the anchors were just approaching it so coldly, and just talking about how, like, here's this young guy who was rich and famous, like, who wouldn't want that? And now he's dead because he couldn't handle it. But then there was one, younger person at the time who was interviewed by NBC, and he's like, I don't think, he's like, if all that's happening, like, and you're still struggling with a lot of stuff, like, it just goes to show you, like, there's a problem, and like, that's not a healthy situation to be in. And I think, people who are certainly successful financially or commercially and famous are the envy of a lot of people. And a situation like this is always kind of a stark reminder that, things are not always as they appear. And that, the grass is not always greener. And I don't think there's any sort of level of success that can, eliminate problems from your life and can automatically make your life problemless. Right. And that's always a lesson that I think I take away from Kurt's death, and certainly a lot of, these individuals in music and their, untimely passings.
Yeah. Not to jump too far ahead, but later we'll talk about George Stroumboulopoulos. He has a Much Music segment where he talks about Layne. It's right after they found out about Layne passing away, and it was actually, that's a very, very interesting clip for us because it was one of the first things that we watched when we began to delve into Alice in Chains and Layne and their stories and Jerry, and it really touched us because it was very raw. It was just him talking to a camera and showing clips and then interviews, but in it he talks about he says, like, obviously, heroin is bad, don't do drugs, like, we're not talking about this, but I think the main thing is here, like yes, drugs were a problem for Layne, but really, like, it's like mental health, and there was a lot of signs, like, of course, like, drugs aren't going to help, but the real problem lies within dealing with their life and the mental challenges and, like, the depression and whatnot. And I think that is could be this, it's the same for Kurt, even though he had these drug problems. I mean, a lot of that is the crutch and the ways to kind of cope with other problems that you're dealing with and can't get around. So, I think that's important to say, like, it's they did drugs, obviously don't do drugs, but, like, there's a much bigger problem that I think ate them from the inside out.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I always think about that too, because everybody's got their problems, and I think a lot more people than the number of people that would let on struggle with depression or anxiety or mental health problems or whatever. But, most of us have the luxury of being able to address those issues without being in the public eye and without our career success being tied into portraying those or writing about those or talking about those. Jerry Cantrell has a lyric on one of his songs, 3132, where he he has the line and he says, "Make a living milking scars." And I always think about that with these artists, where it's like, those things that you're trying to distance yourself from, those destructive elements of who you are, and those things that you struggle with. Like, for a lot of these guys, like, it was directly tied to, what they had to go out every night and sing about and perform about. And just like, I can only imagine like the pressure and the stress that could come from something like that. And it pops into my head every now and then when I'm, listening to those songs or enjoying those songs, because it's like somebody's deepest struggles just laid bare in front of you. And obviously it's a great tool for a lot of us, and it helps explain a lot of those things to us. But, I can't imagine the feeling of, thinking about like the worst things in my life and using them as a tool for others, or talking about it as openly as some of these guys did. But always something I think about this time of year. One other thing that happened on April 8th, 1994, Blind Melon was scheduled to play on David Letterman's show. And there's some stories, because obviously those shows are typically taped in the afternoon, and then they go on the air in the evening, in the later hours. But there's some stories of, people lined up outside the show for Letterman in New York, getting ready to go into the taping and watch it and be in the audience, finding out that Kurt Cobain died. And, I think one of the best tributes was Shannon Hoon. They performed Change for that taping of Letterman, and he wrote a big question mark on his head, and he gave a absolutely unbelievable performance of Change. And then afterwards, he's like, I think I'm speaking for a lot of people when I like to say that we'd like to say goodbye to Kurt Cobain. I think it was just one of those moments and one of those losses that I think stopped everybody in their tracks. And I think more so than anything that we talk about related to grunge, Kurt's death and that impact is the one that I am just completely incapable of relating to, because I think more so than any of the other events that happen in this genre, like, that's the one that you had to have been there for to really feel the full weight of it. And I know with our experiences on the page, like, that one event is the one that I think we get the most people sharing their thoughts at the time about. And like, they all remember so vividly how they found out, where they were when they found out, who they talked to right afterwards about it. And it's just one of those, one of those moments that, I don't think anybody forgets.
Yeah, I think, he was obviously younger than Layne when he passed away. And you could say it'd be more surprising because of the age and obviously the success that they were having. 2 days later, or April 10th in 94, they had a vigil for Kurt in Seattle, and I believe over 20,000 people showed up. And that's huge. If people, there are vigils today, and it probably happens more than I can think of right now, but have 20,000 people show up in the city that it happened, that you're from, to talk about, and there's interviews and there was some speaking on stage, and it's a testament to how important he was to the moment. And I think that, that kind of shocked me when I was like, I watched the video and I found out, I was like, wow, 20,000 people showed up like the day after, and it is this is definitely a harder one to relate to, because, we say it all the time, we just weren't there for it, and we didn't understand the feeling. So all we can do is kind of try to attach it to someone that we feels a certain way about, and our development and influence. But it really is difficult to put the shoes there, and I think that's why it was such a great impact.
Yeah, I think there's just something about when a tragedy strikes, like, you just want to be with people in their presence that feel the same way about it. So I imagine, maybe not that day, but in the long term, being there at that vigil in Seattle was probably helpful for a lot of people. And as you referenced, there were some taped statements from Chris Novoselic and also Courtney Love that were played. And I just want to read Chris's statement. And he went on to say in his taped statement for the vigil, he said, "On behalf of Dave, Pat, and I would like to thank you all for your concern at this time. We remember Kurt for what he was, caring, generous, and sweet. Let's keep the music with us. We'll always have it forever. Kurt had an ethic towards his fans that was rooted in the punk rock way of thinking. No band is special, no player royalty. But if you've got a guitar and a lot of soul, just bang something out and mean it. You're the superstar. Plugged in the tones and the rhythms that are uniquely and universally human. Music. Heck, Use your guitar as a drum. Just catch the groove and let it flow out of your heart. That's the level Kurt spoke to us on, in our hearts, and that's where he and the music will always be forever. I just like, it's crazy, like in the face of tragedy of like losing your brother, that you can speak so eloquently about what he means, like right in the aftermath of it. Like I think that takes a lot of strength to be able to put something that impactful together. And similarly, like you help everybody that's there, everybody that read it, but just speaking about it. I mean, I think a lot of times too, when people pass unexpectedly or something like that happens, you always hear about, people get together and they share their favorite memories of them. And there's a reason why they do that, because it helps. And, just kind of talking about the best parts of Kurt, and the way that he approached music and the way that he, wants people to approach the things that he was passionate about. I think that means a lot. And, even 31 years later, I think a lot of that is advice, and it's still, topical advice. It's still timely and it still matters. And that's, always this time of year, I always think about that. Like, I mean, he's been gone for 31 years, and like what he did and what he made still matters. And there's still people that are listening to it for the first time and going into their Nirvana era for the first time and learning those lessons from his music. That's always really, really special.
It really is. And that is a really great quote by Novoselic. And I think that, as we move on to Layne later too, I mean, hearing the band talk about these members that they lost, hearing Jerry talk about it, and, Sean Kinney and whatnot, like they are really, they have to put words to it right after. And you can just tell, like, I mean, they were loving people that they lost, like taken away too soon. And, it's just, I mean, we've all been affected by this in some capacity. Mm-hmm. And if not, we will, because that is life. Right. And, there's never, it's tough because like there's never a good age to go. Like even when you say, like you said, John Prine was young, but like 74, if we could have got Kurt to age 74, like we would have seen his whole career play out. So it's like, it's such a weird scale where, sometimes 50 is too long. Sometimes you're surprised they made it to 50 or something like that. And it is a weird, it's just a weird time to be in. And so, we only got 27 years of Kurt. And I think that's still like, it seems way too early. And that's why I think it was so difficult for everybody involved.
Yeah, 100%. One more event, just kind of in the aftermath of Kurt's death. A couple of weeks later, on April 16th of 1994, Pearl Jam played Saturday Night Live, and Eddie Vedder wrote Kurt on the headstock of his Fender Telecaster, which people noticed throughout the broadcast. And then at the end, when the band is standing there with all of the talent for SNL, Eddie opened up his shirt. He had like a button-down shirt kind of over top, and he opened it up, and he had written a K over his heart. Once again, just kind of a perfectly stated tribute. And people made so much of the relationship or animosity that Pearl Jam and Nirvana potentially had towards one another, but so much of it was overblown. It's just, it stinks that, drama like that is manufactured while somebody's alive. And then, afterwards, things change, but, mm-hmm. They were both dealing with a lot of the same things, being in the public eye and certainly being more famous than I think either of them were prepared to be. Obviously we're lucky that we've still got Ed kicking around, and, he's right. Aging gracefully, and he's still here with us.
Yeah. And that's just the competition in the media. Like, it's just
got to get their clicks,
buzzing up noise to promote both sides. It's just like promotion type stuff. I'm sure there was not real ill will between the groups. Right. And then moving forward, there's a lot of songs that were written about Kurt's passing, and a ton of really good ones that we probably know. And honestly, there's probably a ton of songs that we didn't write down. A few that would be like "Friend of a Friend" by Foo Fighters, "Sleeps with Angels" by Neil Young, which I watched that video. I looked it up, and it was I think it was the first time I listened to it, to be honest. And it was pretty haunting. Like it is very like intentional. I mean, it's like, it's because some of these are obviously like when you go for a tribute, I mean, it's really like slow and sad and very, simple. It could just be a guitar, with Ed singing over top of it. But this was like pretty intense.
Yeah, I think that the toughest thing about that one for me is knowing how Kurt's death affected Neil Young, particularly because Kurt quoted the Neil Young's lyric, "It's better to burn out than fade away," in the last note that he left. And I can only imagine, that feeling, that somebody chose to use your words in a way while, they decided, what they did. But yeah, that's a tough song. And as you said, I mean, there's songs that I was not aware of that were written, either explicitly or, in kind of more obtusely about Kurt. Some other ones, Tearjerker by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Immortality by Pearl Jam, I think took on that meaning, certainly, and dealt with a lot of those issues with fame. Also, I Don't Blame You by Cat Power, Let Me In by REM, and then The Mighty KC by Four Squirrels, which I know has been a favorite of yours for a while.
Of course, absolutely. And these songs, I guess we'll talk about a little bit with Layne. He talks about, songs are written for a reason, but when you listen to them, you can apply whatever meaning you want to them.
Right.
So there's a ton of songs that I'm sure that you listen to that you can apply to members that passed away or family members. So, the list is really endless for the tributes and the songs dedicated to Kurt.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of songs that were not, explicitly told to be about, anything really. I mean, there's not explanations for every song, even though
nor does there
a lot
have
of people
to be.
a lot of people want that. A lot of people want to know exactly who you're referring to when you're talking about the breakup, but that's not information that's ever going to come out all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we move forward to the reaction of Layne Staley's death, we talked a little bit about kind of the last years of Layne's life as it relates to Alice in Chains when we did the episode on the Music Bank box set, just kind of talking about some of his last recordings. But when he passed away in 2002, I mean, the last stuff that he hadn't performed live with Alice in Chains since 1996, and he had been a pretty reclusive for the last several years of his life. And I think this was one that when it happened, people had kind of in a certain way expected it to happen. So he passed away, as we later found out, on April 5th of 2002. But I don't believe it was found out that he passed away until the 19th or the 20th. And then certainly, in the 20th and in the aftermath, statements were released and people paid tribute in their own ways. So Alice in Chains' statement at the time when Layne passed away, their statement read, "It's good to be with friends and family as we struggle to deal with this immense loss and try to celebrate this immense life. We are looking for all the usual things: comfort, purpose, answers, something to hold on to, a way to let him go in peace. Mostly, we are heartbroken." Oh, I just lost my spot. Excuse me. "Mostly, we are heartbroken over the death of our beautiful friend. He was a sweet man with a keen sense of humor and a deep sense of humanity. He was an amazing musician, an inspiration, and a comfort to so many. He made great music and gifted it to the world. We are proud to have known him, to be his friend, and to create music with him. For the past decade, Layne struggled greatly. We can only hope that he has at last found some peace. We love you, Layne, dearly, and we will miss you endlessly." Yeah. Once again, a beautiful statement that encompasses, I think, everything, the good and the bad, the positives and the things that he struggled with. And, I always appreciate, when people, certainly musicians that, depending on if you didn't read into it much, you just think they're singing about darkness and death and despair all the time. But, people always, I think with Kurt and with Layne, the first thing that they thought of was their humanity and how funny they were, how gentle and kind they were. And it's just a good reminder that, artists, musicians, people in the public eye, they are not only the thing that put them in the public eye. They're not just the person that's singing about, these heavy things. There's a whole human to them, and it's important to remember. I think when we focus so much on the music and what they're saying through the music, there's a person behind that, and there's an entire life that was as vivid to them as your life is to you, that was behind that and that went into that.
Yeah, it's pretty clear when you read comments about when they're watching interviews with Kurt and Layne, and everybody kind of says the same thing. It's like, I can't believe that Layne sings like this and then speaks like this, or Kurt, right, when he's on stage he's like this, but when he's off stage he's so gentle and empathetic, and Layne is so funny and witty and has a soft spoken voice, and it's amazing. Everybody, they all all the interviews of people talking about him, these two guys like kind of say, mirror similar thoughts of like they were really thoughtful in the way they interacted with other people. Tom Morello has a statement where he said, Layne and I became good friends in '93 at the Lollapalooza tour. And he said, I always remember him as a bright, funny, and amazingly talented singer who got up there every hot summer day in a gorgeous suit and sung like an angry angel. We would laugh until we split our sides, arguing about what was more metal. I hope he is at peace. And I love that, an angry angel.
Yeah, I can just picture them like ribbing each other back and forth about which one of them was more metal, and
yeah,
it's just, and that's the thing. Like Layne, like everybody, and like there's a lot of interviews and things that MTV. I mean, they were always around Alice in Chains, and like those guys were hilarious, and Layne was so funny, and it's just like he was that to everybody. I mean, he had such a colorful personality. And I think it affected everybody that kind of knew him off of the stage, and certainly even those people that maybe ran in the same circles as being musicians but might not have had the personal relationship, but saw him perform. As Billy Corgan, when Layne passed away, he said Layne had an amazing voice that had such a beautiful, sad, haunting quality about it. He was different because his heaviness was in that voice. I saw Alice in Chains at one of their final performances, opening for Kiss at Tiger Stadium. They played outside in the sunshine, and they were awesome. I think that's a good way to remember someone who has been and will be missed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just one more quote. I'm going to say it is from Ann Wilson of Heart. Said, Layne wore his soul on the outside. He was luminous, too tender for this world. We're all very sad to lose him, but happy that he's not sick anymore. He's free on his own journey. And it's just, yeah. I mean, like, you get quotes from everybody coming in and like that interact with him, and I believe them. I believe all of these quotes when they say what a joy it was to be with him, and I would love to have those experiences. And there's so many times too where I have friends that I know of that I'm really close with, and I'll talk to somebody else and they'll be like, yeah, this person's super introverted. Like, I don't really know them, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, well, let me tell you, because I do know them. I'm really close to them, and they open up and they're funny. They're this, they're that. I was like, they really are a really special and unique person. And I'm sorry that you don't get to see that side, but you can't open yourself up to everybody. I understand that too. And so when these people interacted with them and know them deeply, who is anybody to say what they were from the outside? Like, we've never interacted with them. All you're reading is headlines, and you're gonna, label somebody with what you think they were. Like, no, that's not it. Let's listen to the people that actually know them, because I think we all can speak with through our personal experiences that when you know somebody on a deeper level, like it's not what people see most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. And even still, like when you know somebody well and they pass away, like how do you sum up a person in a statement? Or like you think of, you go to somebody's funeral and there's somebody eulogizing that person. Like how do you in 5 or 10 minutes sum up this person who was, as I said earlier, like had an entire vivid life, just as vivid as yours. And it's one of those things that I think that picture grows more full the more people that you read their thoughts on that person. And I think with Layne, I mean, there's so many ones out there, both at the time when he passed and in the years since, that they all strike that same chord, talking about the same qualities that he had and the struggles that he had. And it's just like, when so many people remember them, that consistently in the way that the others do, I mean, it really just paints that picture, even more full. And when you put that aside, right next to the music and, your own experiences with the music and how it impacted you, it's like the picture becomes a little more full each time. And when you hear, one more person share their thoughts, and, we do that all the time with the page, we always ask like what they thought or how it impacted them. And, I think we've gained an incredibly full sense of what these people meant to so many people, even though we weren't there. The best way to learn is by listening to the people that were there and how they reacted at the time. And you mentioned earlier, I don't know how or why we discovered this at the beginning, but when we were first starting to get into the whole grunge thing, it was probably 2015, 2016 or something. And I mean, I have no way of remembering who sent this to who first, but there's a 25, 30-minute segment from Much Music, the Canadian television entity, that aired. It must have aired on the 21st because they had the Alice in Chains statement that they mentioned. But George Stroumboulopoulos was a host for Much Music, and this whole segment is just him talking about Alice in Chains and Layne Staley, spliced in with interview clips and music videos, and just, different pieces of his work and his thoughts. And I always go back around this time of year and watch that. I'm so happy that it's still on YouTube and that it hasn't gone away or been deleted or been taken down, because it's such a raw example of how somebody who was a fan first, before they were a TV show personality or a journalist or what have you, and like, I'm glad that whoever was in charge of that show just gave George the runway to just talk about his experiences with Alice in Chains and with Layne, and share it. And I think a lot of people found parallels with what George was talking about.
Yeah, I think it was re-uploaded, because I think the one I clicked on today was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, we saw it like 10 years ago. But yeah, I'm really happy that it's still on there. And like, I think in the beginning, I mean, George, he said a bunch of things that I could quote. I mean, you should go watch it. It's just,
we'll link it in the show notes, because it's too important to not watch.
But he said, like, in there, he just like, everybody has an album or a song that they go to when life sucks, when life's hard. He's like, for me, it's Jar of Flies. So right there, that this guy's credible, right?
Yeah, like, it's for real. Yeah.
If he's talking like Jar of Flies, like as we know on the page, I mean, that's where you go. So like you could tell. I mean, he was a fan. He was a big fan, and like, loved the music for what it was, and he had a lot of great thoughts about it, and he kept it, like you said, kind of based around like, how you deal with loss, because everybody deals with this. And this is not like, we're not talking about, a drug user. We're talking about a friend and family member and somebody that was struggling, and you're going to experience that in life, because that's how life works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one theme of that special and his comments was, he just continually referenced the authenticity with which Layne wrote and sang.
Yes.
And, Layne talked about that a lot. He'd said, over the years, he's like, it's like we write about ourselves because we know ourselves. He's like, there's a lot of people out there, rockers that write about babes and cars and stuff they don't know anything about. He's like, we're just writing about ourselves and our feelings, because that's what we know best, and that's what we're best equipped to write about and sing about. And George echoed that. He's like, you take one listen to these guys and you know that they're not messing around and that they're for real. And that authenticity is something that I think as the years go on, it's only becomes more and more apparent, and just how genuine it was, and kind of, tying that back into what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, your occupation is laying bare the deepest parts of who you are and what you know about yourself. And it's just, it's an incredible thing to be able to do. And it, whether you like the music or you don't, you instantly recognize that, I think, with Layne and with Kurt.
Yeah, it's a really great watch. And I think that, I miss stuff like that. We were talking earlier, like, that it would be packaged so different nowadays, and it would be so well put. And this was just like, it was like, oh crap, like this happened. Like, let's get the camera rolling. Like, George, like, what do you got? And they were doing, it was great. It was honestly perfect. And I would love to, I would love to talk to George about it. He's the man when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, that George is definitely, I don't use this word often, but I think one of our heroes when it comes to talking about music and just like the way that he lives his life and the connections that he makes, and the topics that he gets into, I mean how much he's provided, I think, to the music world. And I think in a weird way, like, his style informed, I think, a lot of how we talk about music and
100%.
how we present it and what it means to us. I mean, that guy,
this is one of the first things that we watched. Right?
Yeah.
And the way that he kind of talked about it, like, I feel like that really did have an influence on how we decided, like, we're just going to like talk about this, and we don't care how it comes off. Like, we don't care how it's taken. We're not trying to be anything, like, if we do it wrong, it doesn't matter, because this is like he said, he's like, I know this at the end, he's like, I know this is kind of a heavy hour. And he's like, whatever, man, that's life. He's like, that's what happens when you lose someone that's close to you. That means something to you.
Yeah.
It's like, like this is what happens.
Yeah. And the thing I loved about that, that segment that he did is like, he's not pontificating about an artist. Like it's like the lessons and the dealing with loss are as applicable to a public figure that you admire as they are to people in your own life, because you don't just lose artists that you appreciate. You know, you lose parents, you lose siblings, you lose lifelong friends, and it's just like a case study in loss. And you know, it's always the same thing with Eddie Vedder that night in Fairfax. It's like, you know, how do people right from the jump when they first hear the news, like what do they focus on? Like what is their most vivid memory, and you know, the value that they got from this person, either knowing them or appreciating what that person did or what they taught them. And I think that's always an important thing to do, obviously. Right around that time, Jerry Cantrell was excuse me, he was performing solo, and he had a show about a week after everybody found out that Layne passed away in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm not sure at what point in the show this happened, but somebody had a T-shirt and it had a picture of Layne, and they threw it up to the stage, and Jerry picked it up and held it out in front for everybody to see. And you know, I mean, that man too, I mean, everything that he's been through with his loss, and you know, he's had to talk about it for so many years. And there was a quote one time in an interview, he said, he's like, it sucks to be the guy that, you know, always has to talk about, you know, my dead best friends, and, you know, reach a point where you want to be able to move forward and carry their memory with it. And, you know, both he and Sean Kinney have spoken about, you know, when they play Nutshell or they play stuff that, you know, Layne contributed heavily to or wrote, how it's always an emotional experience to them. And I think if there's one man in rock and roll that's, you know, mastered the ability to, you know, carry the past with him, but be able to write new chapters for himself and to continue to grow, it's Jerry. And there's a big lesson in that. You know, you carry that loss with you, but you know, there's always room for other things as time goes on. And that's an important lesson with loss too.
Yeah, that video is really cool to see. You know, he pointed and it's like, throw me the shirt, and then the crowd cheered. And there's a comment on there that said, Layne showed us to be who you are, and Jerry showed us the power of who you can be. And, you know, I thought about that, and, you know, because in that performance, you know, Jerry he didn't have a guitar in his hand. Like he was leading because he had to, you know, and he was solo, but like, you know, it was a representation of like, you know, he's going to have to lead the band. And I think William Duvall was playing with him that time.
That was one of
the first times they played together. It was one of the first
times they played together, yeah.
Yeah, and I think they had met in 2000, but it was like one of the first few times. And obviously, like, he plays Layne's, you know, he sings Layne's parts and whatnot. But Jerry, like, you know, he continued afterwards, and like, obviously he's still writing music and has a career, and like, you know, despite everything that has happened. And that is, you know, it's really inspiring. I mean, and he pushed himself, like, you know, he's singing, and like, I mean, you know, we love his voice, and I'm, you know, he feels more comfortable behind a guitar, I'm sure, you know, just playing the parts and being able to focus on that. And, you know, it's such an awesome, I mean, seeing him go on, and I mean, seeing everybody kind of go on. I mean, obviously Dave and the Foo Fighters, and, you know, Pat Smear and all the guys.
Yeah. Well, that's the tough thing, like, about this genre. And I mean, we talk about all the time because it's so prevalent. I mean, this in a way could have been a lot of them. I mean, so many of these guys had their darkness and had their struggles with substance abuse. I mean, Jerry too, I think, and Mike McCready as well, you know, having really connected with Layne while they were in rehabilitation. And it's just, you know, I think it speaks to the fragility. Like, these things are not, you know, this darkness and substance abuse, depression, like, those diseases are not discerning with who they pick to afflict. I mean, it can happen to anybody. And it certainly does happen to a lot of people, you know, for no rhyme or reason. And it's a hard thing to get through. I mean, you hear it. I mean, we all know people, unfortunately, I think, when it comes to, you know, struggling with addiction, and God knows the opioid crisis. And I mean, you know, I didn't graduate high school, not, you know, all that long ago, and there's already people from my class that have died from these things. And you know, there's friends of ours, and, you know, people that we knew and spent time with that aren't here anymore because of those things. And it's just anytime you think about it, it's sobering to know that it really it really can happen to anybody, and it's not an easy thing to get through, and it's not a sign of weakness to struggle with those things. You know, they're very difficult things that, you know, you can come across in life.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And like you said, yeah, the Alice in Chains, they were very, I mean, you think like Junkhead, We Die Young, or all the songs that they were, I mean, they sung about what they were going through.
Rotten Apple, Angry Chair. I mean, all of those songs.
Yeah. Wood was, you know, about
Andy Wood. Yeah.
About Andy. And and it's like, it's just, you know, it's crazy. The experiences and how it all, you know, unfolded for everybody. So, but yeah, a lot came out of it, you know, and there were a ton of songs that, again, I mean, Layne had a huge impact on the music community, and it was not easy. This was no easier than any other that we experienced loss. Even though, yeah, it was the same difficulty. And a lot of people came out and made songs to kind of, pay tribute, which is, you know, I think wonderful. I think there's no better reason to write a song than for somebody else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of those songs, 42002, which Eddie Vedder wrote, it's a hidden track on B Girl, which was released on the Lost Dogs compilation album, is, you know, unbelievably emotional. And Eddie's writing about it the day that he found out that Layne died, which was April 20th of 2002. There's that one. And then when Alice in Chains did reform, I mean, their album Black Gives Way to Blue, and the title track as well. A lot of their subsequent tracks on Devil Put the Dinosaurs Here and Rainier Fog about that. Even Aaron Lewis from Stained wrote a song called Layne. You know, and there's a line in there where he says, like, my life you saved, your name was Layne. I mean, you know, there's just, there's a lot out there. And even, I'm sure I've read it on the show in the past, but Mark Lanigan chose to end his memoir, Sing Backwards and Weep, with his experience of finding out that Layne passed away. And, you know, and he wrote that book in 2019 and it was released in 2020, and he ends it, it was a call that I had expected for years, but it destroyed me nonetheless. His loss left a void I've felt every day since. I expect I always will. I mean, and that's, you know, 17, 18 years after the fact. And, you know, and same thing with the guys in Alice in Chains and, you know, Mike and Barrett from Mad Season and everybody that knew him. I mean, that's something that, you know, you take somebody away like that, you know, there's nothing you can ever do to fill that space again. You just have to grow other spaces around that and fill those spaces. And, you know, I'm grateful a lot of those guys have been able to, you know, for all of the time that they were on this earth, and the people that are still here with us continuing. You know, anytime I think, you know, Jerry or Alice in Chains, they go out and play some of those songs. I mean, how can you not be thinking about Layne? And, you know, as a fan, you know, I haven't seen Alice in Chains, but I've seen Jerry a few times, and, you know, when they play those songs, and, you know, you can't not think about him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, you really can't. And I like what you wrote about or you brought up the Mark Lanigan. I knew you would. And if you want to read the actual interaction that he had of finding out that Layne passed, you do a good job with reading Mark's thing, so I'll let you do it. But I wanted to make sure that was said, because it's so real. It's just so real.
Yeah. So this was literally the last page in his book, the last passage in it. He said, a few years later, I was recording in Houston with Randall Jamail, fulfilling my end of the bargain that had kept me out of a tax debtor's prison. One night in my room at the Holiday Inn, I got a phone call from Lori Davis, my huge-hearted, long-suffering accountant, the only person from my time in the trees who continued to care enough to work with me. Mark, please sit down. I'm so sorry, but I have terrible news, and it's going to hurt. I'm so sorry. Layne, I asked. Yes, honey, he's gone. It was a call that I had expected for years, but it destroyed me nonetheless. His loss left a void that I felt every day since. I expect I always will. And I think, you know, that was the sentiment that I think a lot of people had around Layne, and certainly Jerry did too. You know, I think from 1996 until Layne died, there wasn't an interview that went by where people weren't asking him, you know, how's Layne? What is he up to? And, you know, he would never let on, you know, the extent of how much Layne had been struggling and how dark things had become. But, you know, you could tell, you know, there was that one, I think it was from maybe 98 or 99. And he's like, every single time, people expect me to give some sort of status report on Layne. He's like, no, he's doing well. He's probably writing a song or something at home. But behind his words, and you can see it in his eyes, I think it's certainly one that people had been able to expect, and certainly had been unable to stop. And that's, just speaks to how tough this shit is.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, yeah, you just reading that, and like, for me, like, it's hard not to well up, like my eyes filled with tears, because exactly what Mark said. He's like, it's a call that I had expected, and it destroyed me nonetheless. And I think there are people in my life where, like, I remember one of my brother's friends, he called me and said that, he had passed away. And I was like, how are you feeling? He's like, it's like, I was expecting that call. And that is such a, like I said, there's people that, like, I won't be surprised when it happens, and it kills me. It's going to hurt no matter what. And like, obviously the book is not written, and hopefully things can change, but that is like the harsh reality with this type of things is, and especially with Layne's stories, it's hard to say you saw it coming, but like, exactly like you said, it's like something you expected. And that is a harsh reality that, like, when I think about it, I mean, it just kills me, because there's people that I know, and there's hurting experiences.
We've gone through it, exactly. And like the pragmatic part of your brain can objectively, measure the odds and kind of, think like there's a good chance this happens. But, even that pragmatic sense and that understanding does nothing to quell those feelings that you get when it does happen. I know, like, we had a friend from our time in Pittsburgh that, we'd gotten really friendly with, and, the last, I think, year and a half of his life, we hadn't been hearing from him much. And, we had heard that, he wasn't doing great. And then I remember, we got that call, and it's, nothing prepares you for something like that. And, it feels blindsiding regardless of how much notice you've had or how likely you thought it would end that way. It feels like it's completely unexpected. That's what loss is.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a loss. And it's always hard. So, I mean, that kind of wraps up like all my thoughts on this thing. I mean, it's going back to what we said. I mean, hearing other people that knew these two men talk about them, and just kind of, emphasize what kind-hearted people there were and how funny and stuff. I mean, that is, that's something that we can take and move forward with, and we have to just celebrate the talents. And we have the music, and we say that all the time. We have the music that we can go back and listen to, and live in that space for a little bit at least. So 100%,
as we will continue to do that for the days and years to come, as I know everybody out there is continuing to do that too. So that's our trip through how these guys were remembered by people that knew them, and certainly in all of our own ways, we continue to remember them in the ways that we do. And I'm glad that we get to do that with everybody out there listening.
Absolutely. All right. It's just like freaking Strombo said, I know it's been a heavy hour, but hey, whatever, man, that's life.
That's life, man.
That's what happens. Life's a tough gig. That's what happens when people mean something to you. Whatever, that's life. That's how I feel right now.
Yeah.
A heavy episode for the Grunge Bible podcast.
Yeah. It's like the, it's better to have loved and lost quote, it's like,
exactly.
It's better to have had this shit mean something to you and lose it than it is to, go through life and not have anything mean anything to you. So shit still means a lot. So Ethan, thanks for the heavy hour. It was good.
Absolutely, and definitely make sure you go watch the Much Music with George.
Yeah, I'll throw that puppy in the show notes.
George is an absolute king, and it would be an honor to be able to talk to him. I mean, he's like, he's moving in like the what he does for music, because he has like a radio show and he does like basement concerts. I think he still does.
He had House of Strombo, which
House of Strombo, that's people, what it was.
I think even tied into John Prine's death. I think like he had John Prine at his house doing that. I know Melvin's played a set there. Yeah, I mean and that dude
Mac DeMarco,
that dude interviewed everybody. Like I remember every so often, like he did a great interview with Anthony Bourdain before he died, and that one always pops up. I mean, that's a man who's I couldn't have more admiration for him. I might go watch the Bourdain
interview because that would be special. He's just a great thinker and not swayed. Like he has his own thoughts, and and you can just tell. So I would push everybody to go watch that after this. A good follow up.
Yeah. So as it stands, I think this episode's going to end up checking in at like an hour 15, an hour 20. So just pretend that the podcast is like an hour 40, and it's mandatory that you go and you watch the Much Music interview because it's about 20 minutes. So you're going to want to go and check that one out. I'll make sure it's linked. So yeah, man.
Awesome. Well, that really does wrap up another episode of the Grunge Bible Podcast. Do we have a song? Do you have any songs of the week that you wanna shout out real quick?
Yeah, I'll pick the Stain song about Layne Staley, which is called Layne, and it was from 14 Shades of Grey, their album, which came out in May of 2003. So that one's gonna be my song of the week. Also, a heater on that album, Yesterday and So Far Away, are on that Stain record. So definitely,
what a voice,
dude. I might listen to some Stain later. I mean, the Break the Cycle album with Outside and It's Been a While. I mean, shit. Dude,
I know those songs are. That's right in the sweet spot, man. Yeah, right when we were growing up, right in the sweet spot. So I think I'm gonna do the same. I might go for a walk. I think the sun came out. I'm gonna go. I was gonna say,
don't do it if the sun's not out. You gotta have something to balance out. Like it's still cloudy here. I don't think I can do it today, but maybe tomorrow.
Don't want to risk it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. For me, I mean, I guess I should probably stick within the vein of what we're doing. I think I have another song that I found that I'm pumped about, but I'll save it. I feel like I'm gonna gatekeep it for another week. But I'll say "Sleep with Angels" by the Neil Young song. Cool. That song was really great, and it's not too long. I think it's only like 2.5, 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's a short one.
Yeah, but really great song. So put those two on there.
Awesome. That's pretty great.
Cool, man.
Yeah, dude.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. It's a pleasure to be your host here at the Grunge Bible Podcast. Thank you, Drew McFadden, our producer. I believe in the next few weeks we're going to have him come on. We haven't heard from him in a while. And so please be on the lookout for more episodes every Monday, actually. So you can count on it.
You can.
And we'll be back next week, and we're going to try to do better next time.
You better believe it. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thank you to our producer, Drew McFadden. Thank you in particular to Sunshine Slackers and Abraham is the cutest bastard town ever for raising the bar. And maybe next week we'll have some more people to thank in that way. But thank you, Ethan, for a good last 90 minutes. And we'll leave everybody there and dismiss this thing for another week.
Awesome. Stay heavy out there, everybody. Rock and roll.
Rock and roll. See you, everyone.